Grindr's new CEO is getting flack for his conservative political views. This is the Focus Group.
They're all business, except when they're not. It's the Focus Group with Tim Bennett and John Nash.
Welcome to the Focus Group. John Nash here with my good friend and co-host, Mr. Tim Bennett. FocusGroupRadio.com is the URL for our website, and that's all things Focus Group, including TFG Unbuttoned, our Tuesday podcast. And when you're at the website, you can learn about some of our partners and sponsors, and that includes Deep Discount. We'll be visiting with them a little later in the show. So to give you a little rundown of how we operate here, we start with some harmless banter. Sometimes it's not so harmless. What caught your eye? Which is a segment that Tim and I bring some interesting stuff to the table. Deep Discount, little visit with them, take a quick break. Then we have the only show in the universe that does this, The Business Birthday, one of our favorites, and Shop Talk, which today is going to be looking at two topics. One of them I teased at the beginning, which is the incoming Grindr CEO is already getting flack for his conservative political views. No surprise there. And apparently Americans are becoming less productive, but the reasons are probably a little more familiar than you might suspect. So, Mr. Bennett, you're back in Rehoboth. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's,
I like the way you just roll your eyes like, thank you.
No, fall is my favorite time of year, so I've always liked
Minus
the
the
fall.
pumpkin spice.
You know, I haven't had any pumpkin spice latte or anything. I used to look forward to it because it was rare. And then when they started doing them in August, and it's kind of like Christmas in July, right? So when they started putting Christmas stuff out early.
No longer rare, huh?
So I haven't done but I also then would look at the calories that those things would be with the whipped cream and everything else. So I don't buy the $6 coffees anymore. You know, things are getting tough. Things are expensive. Everything. I get this cream that Richard insists on buying, this Dunkin' Donuts cream for the coffee, which I know is not good, and I still don't understand. My mother makes just regular old Folgers coffee with cream, and it's the best coffee on the planet. And I can't figure out how she makes it. It must be the water. It must be Mom's touch. Just regular sugar and cream, and it is the best coffee I can get anywhere. I've tried to replicate it at home. I can't. So Richard insists on this.
Whoa. Is it the machine? Is it a filter?
I have the same machine. It's got to be the water, I guess, and it's got to be her balance of. I've watched how much coffee she puts in the.
I was going to ask the next question. How many scoops does she put in?
You know, it's just a regular old can of Folgers, and she just throws in the coffee, and then in the morning, I get the cup out. I put in a couple of teaspoons of sugar and regular light cream, and it is delicious. And I can't figure out why I can't make it myself.
It's your
I also
mother's love,
watched her
right?
try to make. I've watched her make meatloaf. And the meatloaf was so good I couldn't control myself. And I was like, Mom, how did you make this? She's like, salt, pepper, and egg. I was like, meanwhile, I've got to, And
you forget love.
It's so funny because, she makes, same with chili. She made this chili one day. And I was like, oh, my God, this is fantastic. What'd you put in it? Beans, chopped meat, salt and pepper. I guess it's because I probably try to spice too many things and maybe I overspice them. But, so anyway, this cream that Richard insists on getting from Dunkin' Donuts, it went from $2.89 to $3.29.
To buy it as a packaged
It's
thing.
just a container of cream. It's $7.15.
How could you explain that with? I know
I
that
don't
things
know.
are going up, but
And eggs, everything, eggs, chicken, all these other things. But I said $7.15 is outrageous. The sliced cheese, the Cracker Barrel.
Cracker Barrel, yeah.
The cheese that used to be $3.59 is $5.29. Ben & Jerry's ice cream, Cherry Garcia. Richard likes Cherry Garcia. We'd always have ice cream. So that was always hovering. I always thought that was expensive to begin with, and it would hover $3.79, $4.29.
Okay.
It could be $5. That's $4.99. $7.29 now for that.
how much are you paying for a dozen eggs down at the beach?
They're $5.99, $6.29, something. Which
I thought I was paying
I'm
more here in the city. We're $5.29. Upstate, I can get them for $3.39.
Yeah, I look to find who's having a sale, but it's.
Bob and I went out to dinner last night. His mom had been she had some breathing issues. She was in the hospital for a couple days, doing great. He came back from visiting her, and we went to dinner. And we went to a little Indian restaurant we go to all the time. And the last time we ate there, I think the bill was like $60. Now it was 75 or 80. And it wasn't that we had anything different. You know, you have a cocktail. Okay, we each had a drink. Then we had a puri bread and something else in the main thing, which we got to take some home with us. Or I was going to ask you about. Bob had a day off, and we went to the Whitney Museum of Modern Art, and afterwards we went to Starbucks to get tea, and I convinced him to get a green chai tea latte.
Right.
You know, and he was like, latte, and I said, you can have anything. I said he had soy milk put in because he's lactose problems. He loves it now. He loves this. But I said to him, the ticket here is you got to watch out what the latte part is, because that's what adds the calories. Tea is nothing. Tea is like almost 0 calories, right? But then you add that cream or the soy milk in. But it's one of my new favorites now too. I think
Are you
you
drinking that
introduced me
now?
to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're now getting a little fix, your little hit.
Well, now and then. I'm not really a tea drinker, and I haven't been a coffee drinker. Although I'm told I make great coffee upstate.
Really?
I don't drink it. Well, I was taught years ago that if you're going to make 7 cups, then you put in 8 big teaspoons of the grinds into the filter thing. So you always plus 1. And every guest we've ever had, I've been like, how's the coffee? They're like, oh, it's fantastic. I'll have more.
Did your parents drink coffee growing up?
No. My mom drank. She was a tea drinker.
So in the morning they would have a cup of tea. They didn't have coffee.
I think that my dad might have drank coffee, and it could have been Maxwell House or Sanka. What was this? You could have it by the cup.
Well, it
that
was
the-
instant, which you throw just boiling water in, which would be
Yes.
Sanka.
That was
Be
Sanka.
an
Yeah,
instant
it was
cup of
orange
coffee.
label,
Yeah.
if I remember.
Oh,
Yeah.
that would be, that's hardcore, boy. Woo. That and a cigarette. Start your day.
And I remember one of the last times I saw my dad was at my sister's birthday party many years ago, before he passed away. And he used to be a smoker, and I was like, "Are you still smoking?" And he's like, 2 packs a day. And he opened up one side of his blazer, had 1 pack, one had the other, and I'm like, 2 packs a day. There you go.
A lot of people that smoke 2 packs a day. My grandfather I think he smoked 2 packs a day.
How
And I
long
tried
did he
to-
live?
We lived to 80 something.
Okay.
And a lot of them were unfiltered, Canadian. But I wondered how, I tried to figure, that's 40 cigarettes, right? So I tried to figure out how many you would do. I guess you would do 2 an hour. I don't know. I was trying to figure out how many that would be an hour. Or how you, I
Yes,
was trying
so-
to figure out how many they were doing in that. Like,
Let's say that your smoking range is 14 hours, right?
right.
Then you would basically divide the 40 by the 14, right?
Yes, I guess it's three an hour. 3, I guess. I don't know.
2.8 to be precise.
Yeah.
And so some hours you have. Well, you knew a lot of folks back in the day. You know,
When I was a
you and
headhunter, the boss, he would light one off the other, and sometimes
Yep.
have 2 going in the ashtray.
yeah.
Yeah, he was probably a 4-pack a day, or more. He was manic. I mean, he smoked like crazy. Tarrington's what he smoked.
We were watching some old movies on Turner Classic Movies the other night, and every time we watch an old film, Bob and I laugh our butts off because they're all smoking.
Everyone smokes,
They all
and after dinner, everyone had a cigarette.
There's boxes of them. There's special things for lighters. There's just everybody smoked, and it's just what you did, right?
Well, that's why I miss the old. It used to be on the old. I guess it was I don't know what the old game show network was, but they would do the old Beat the Clock or some of the old I've Got a Secret, and that was the consolation gift for the contestants. You got a box of Winston's,
Carton of cigarettes.
carton of cigarettes.
Remember that time you did that song where Winston tastes bad, like or
The water
Winston-
I just had. No filter,
no
taste. It's a
taste.
50-cent waste. Yeah, but that used to be a little song as a kid. But so you used to get a carton of cigarettes, and everybody in the audience got a carton of cigarettes. Take home.
It's better than canned squid, I suppose. That was let's make a deal. Canned squid. All right, without further ado, what caught your eye?
What caught your eye? Here's what Tim and John found.
So this was, this almost could have gone on our Tuesday podcast, TFG Unbuttoned, but I read this and I just smiled because many times we talk about how people often find loopholes or how people get ahead of government
Workarounds.
workarounds. And so the headline is, here's how hundreds of Chinese same-sex couples are getting married in Utah. So of course, same-sex marriages are illegal in China, but there's a loophole that many Chinese have figured out, and of all states, Utah. And Utah is performing hundreds of same-sex marriages for Chinese couples, which are not recognized in China, but the Chinese couples don't seem to care. And they're doing these Zoom weddings out of Provo, Utah. So it's I'll read part of the story. It says a legal loophole has led a slew of LGBTQ couples from China, where same-sex marriage is not recognized, to get legally married in Provo, Utah. Two laws in the state have converged to make this possible. Number one, the state of Utah does not have residency or citizenship requirements for marriage licenses. And number two, Utah County, where the city of Provo is located, allows international marriages online. So since 2020, about 200 same-sex Chinese couples have taken advantage of this loophole. Their marriages, while not recognized in China, allows them some semblance of a legal union, and the Chinese nationals, of course, are very happy about it. There have been over 600 marriages done in countries, other countries such as Russia, the Philippines, and Singapore, and many others that have also, as this is spread, about being able to do this in Utah. I guess it's been a boon for the state of Utah. So they said some have made a very big fanfare online, but they try to keep it quiet, and they'll just say we're having a friends ceremony or something, so the government overseers don't catch on. They said one of the marriage officiants, Mike Foley, says they usually wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning. They log into Zoom to officiate these weddings. He says he's usually in his pajama bottoms, and he says it's very much a traditional wedding ceremony. It's a $100 fee, and they do a very traditional wedding. He says that they will conduct the wedding, and then he will often refer to them to make sure, in case somebody is listening, he says because of the anti-LGBTQ Chinese government cracking down and censoring LGBTQ media, he'll often call them best friends, or won't refer to it necessarily as marriage, but as a joining of best friends or something to make sure they're okay. As I said, the cost is $100, far less than it would be for them to certainly travel. And many people have said the irony is that 72% of the population of Utah is Mormon, which is anti-LGBTQ for same-sex marriage. That they said the church is against same-sex marriage, though there have been stories. I guess the city of Salt Lake does have a very active city council, which has a number of gay and lesbian people that serve on it. One of the officiants, or one of the council people in Utah, says if you believe in individual liberty, same-sex marriage is a natural consequence of it. They said love spans all nations, cultures, and languages, and the fact that same-sex marriage is allowed in the United States, we are simply following the law. Utah County has decided to do Zoom weddings, and we decided to do so way before the pandemic in 2020. This had nothing to do with us offering marriage licenses outside of the United States, because when the shutdown happened, we were still doing in-person weddings, but we offered the Zoom weddings for people that could not travel distances to get to be married. So they were offering it to other people within the state. They were offering these Zoom weddings. And then it ended up people were coming and wanting to do them online. So people from Vegas and other states out west were doing these online weddings. And then it ended up being, as I said, spread. People in countries such as Russia, the Philippines, and China discovered that they could do this from this loophole that we mentioned earlier. So they also will allow officiants, other officiants, to do it. So there's a radio host out of St. George, Utah, who's also doing it. He says he's married dozens of Chinese couples. He's done it through the radio. And he will give them, the marriage rights. He says he does it as well at 3 a.m. He usually does it on the weekends. He says he loves doing it. It's like a Hallmark Christmas movie every time, he says. He turns on his laptop.
Okay.
He says the people are committed. It's a wonderful thing. And they do the whole exchanging of rings, he says, and he usually ends it with saying, I hope someday your country recognizes you and supports you and embraces your love and your relationship. Love is love. So
Do they get a?
they get a certificate. They get everything.
I was going to ask you, do they get something emailed to them
license.
that's
Yep.
basically like you're married officially?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
They get all the forms. They get everything. It's $100 fee. It's proof that, and they have to prove that they're of legal age. And they said so to prove that they're eligible for the nuptials, which would be, I think you have to be 18 or whatever the legal age is. And then they send the licenses to them to China, and they're stamped and notarized from Utah County, and the marriage license that says they're legally married. So they would be recognized in the U.S., of course.
I was going to ask if they ever emigrated here,
Yeah, they'd be legally married.
they would be legally okay.
Recognized,
Interesting.
yeah.
And the fact that it's coming out of the state of Utah with the Church of the Latter-day
Well, that's what everybody
Saints.
thinks is even funnier. But they
Funny.
said that, this is an example of the people of China getting ahead of their government, and which is really, they said the Chinese government is going full force and cracking down on any sort of LGBTQ media, and even spaces and events. They're censoring all kinds of whether it's pride events or any sort of media that might be LGBTQ friendly, similar to our friends in Russia.
Yeah, I've just
So-
never understood the drive for any of this, but that's, well, hey, look.
So good for the
Okay.
Chinese, good for the
Yeah.
Chinese citizens that have found a loophole. And some of the pictures were quite fun of the folks getting married and doing this. And I think, it's interesting that some of these countries will be a powder keg. Look what's happening in Iran, where the women are finally fed up, right?
Beyond
And,
fed up. Yeah.
Right. So it's
The morality police. I mean, think of that term for a moment, right?
Yeah.
The morality police. Well, mine couldn't be any further away from the happy nuptials of Chinese gay couples finding the loophole in Utah. But here we go. Halloween is the time when everybody puts stuff outside the house, right? A lot of it, like I've seen on my bike rides upstate, the blow up skeletons, the whole bit. Well, apparently the new hit thing is something called Empty Soul Girl on a Swing. Have you seen this at all?
no.
Okay, so apparently Home Depot sold something back in 2020, 2021 that's hard to find now, but it was a skeleton. It was a 12-foot Home Depot skeleton famously saved Halloween in 2020. So it's a big thing that people would put out in front of their house. Well, now there's the Empty Soul Girl on a Swing. And the guy that wrote this had such a funny time with the language. He said, nestled in between the adult bad habit nun costume and the spirit Halloween merch she swung, not a care in the world, this earthly realm, perched upon her faux plank of wood with a decrepit blowout, worthy of the Dyson Airwrap. Her soul wasn't just haunted, it was empty, in a Lana Del Rey high by the beach meets bog bodies kind of way. She was a cool girl, and she's the true standout of the best Halloween decorations this year. And then he goes on to say, people have always loved to go all out for Halloween, but something shifted in the culture when the 12-foot Home Depot skeleton famously saved Halloween in 2020. He obscured not only urban lawns, but our own pandemic anxiety with his handsome, towering bones and those piercing, sexy LCD eyes. Now it's nearly impossible to find him in stock, where he sells for $2.99 at Home Depot. There are alternative towering skeletons on Amazon.
$299?
Yeah. But they're spency, meaning spendy, and Empty Soul Girl on a Swing, however, is a mere $69. And she's also 70 inches tall, or 1 foot taller than Snooki from the Jersey Shore. Remember Snooki from
Snooki.
Jersey Shore, which is pretty impressive given her low price. Empty Soul Girl on a Swing is for the people because she's priced for the people. She's a comrade. I mean, he actually put that in there. I couldn't stop laughing. She's priced for the people. She is the people. She's a comrade. So she's alluring but enigmatic. She's just bored with you. She's doing the most while doing the absolute least. She just sits there. She's the must-have spooky season item of the year and the perfect addition to our classic lineup of 90s pumpkin string lights and gourds. So
I wonder if she glows in the dark. It looks like that dress might glow.
I think she does, yeah. Empty, but look at the box. Empty Soul Girl on a Swing. Like,
It looks like Alanis Morissette. I wonder how we missed this. 2020. This was a brilliant idea. Another thing we missed.
this year. The skeleton was 2020, but who thought of this? There was someone in a department somewhere who had to come up with merchandise for Halloween. They're like, I got it.
Yeah.
We're going to have an empty soul girl on a. I mean, it's just so.
Well, what's so great about it is Halloween has become such a huge. I don't want to say holiday. I guess it's a holiday, but it's become such a huge moneymaker for some of these
Yeah.
retail establishments now, right? It's become almost as popular for decoration as Christmas, and or certainly bigger than Thanksgiving. But Matthew used to go all out with the Halloween decorations.
Well, you
we
did
had
too.
flying
You-
witches and all
You
kinds
had the
of stuff.
dogs in costumes.
Oh,
You
yeah.
had big candy bars.
Yeah. So, but I love this. I'm wondering how you would hang it. I wonder if there must be hooks over the top. Unless she's
Could you
on
hang
a
her
swing.
outside your house?
Oh, I would. I'd hang this.
Maybe put a little light on her.
And make her swing and a little noise.
The empty soul. Empty soul. Like she's hollowed out. She's nothing. It's like us after watching TV or the C-SPAN.
Where'd you
Congress
find
debates.
this? Do you
I think
remember?
I found this on Gizmodo or Vice. I'd have to double check, but I found this a while ago and I saved it for this.
It's
'cause we're
smart.
so-
It's a smart. I think the person who did this kind of smart. It's like the elf on the shelf.
the elf on the shelf. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a
So
it's a
there
good
you
thing.
go. We have weddings taking Chinese citizens, same-sex couples marrying via loophole and Zoom in Utah,
And Mormon
then we go
Utah.
to empty soul girl on a swing at $69. The price is also gay friendly, I suppose. When you think of it that way.
Jeez.
All right, folks. Moving on. As many of you know, Deep Discount is a partner of ours here on the Focus Group, and we would love for you to visit their site by going to ours, focusgroupradio.com, and clicking on the Deep Discount logo. I have sent out all the Criterion discs and socks from our wonderful September Criterion month. Thank you, everybody, for playing. A number of you played and guessed correctly for many of the films, so you'll be getting discs or socks. I sent out over 20 movies and about, I think, over 10 pairs of socks. As I laughed with Tim the other day about all the stuff you have to do to mail something. There's a lot
Yes.
of work involved in packaging and labels. But everybody did great. Most guesses were accurate. The only one that kind of fooled people was 12 Angry Men. A number of people mistook it for To Kill a Mockingbird, and I can definitely see why because of some of the intonations of Henry Fonda's character in 12 Angry Men. But anyway, here we are. Deep Discount. This week we have a sale, and the sale is Where in the Name. So it's kind of like Casablanca, a film that Tim has not seen. Coming to America. See, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. The Temple of Doom's a place.
Right,
So
places
Mr.
in the
Bennett,
name.
yeah,
Exactly.
what's in the name? What did you pick?
Well, I picked just because I thought it would make you laugh. Exactly. So I couldn't believe my fortune. There's a 3-film collection, and 2 of the films I've not seen, which you make fun of me, but it's a 3-film collection. It's The Wizard of Oz, Gone with the Wind, which I've not seen, and Casablanca, which I've not seen. So just recently released last year in this 3-film set. You can get it on DVD for under $16 at deep discount. And I thought, what a great collection for me to have all of these in one place. The Wizard of Oz, Casablanca, and Gone with the Wind.
When you sent the link to this, I couldn't believe your lucky day.
Well, it was a lucky day for me, I thought, isn't it?
Because I mean you're a big fan of the Wizard of Oz, and there you have 2 that you could just get the 3-pack and you're done. You're gonna round out your American Film Institute and get required
Interestingly,
films.
I found a very long academic critique of the Wizard of Oz and about what the Wizard of Oz was really about. And they said it was about the gold standard. I'll have to send it to you sometime. Read it.
Money, right?
And they said that the Tin Man represented the Industrial Revolution, that the Straw Man represented the farmers, that the Emerald City was Washington, D.C. They went through this whole thing. It was quite interesting. But
Did you buy it?
I read it, and to me it was quite plausible that as they explained it. But I'm sure you can make any story fit your narrative. But
Yeah, that's hey,
I'll
well,
send
look,
it to you because I think
Please
you'll find
do.
it interesting. They gave each person a character, and and which each person, each character represented as to what was going on at the time. And so I don't know. I was going to send it to our friend Mark over, who used to work at the Fed, and see what he thought about it.
You know, I love stuff like that because many people know that The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings were written by Tolkien as stories for his son, who was actually in the war. I think it would be World War I or World War II. And so it's a metaphor for the evil empire that was Germany.
Right.
So there's Sauron was Hitler, the whole bit. And once you read that kind of academic analysis of what went into the story or why the story was crafted in a certain way, it is kind of fascinating. Now, I'd like to see that.
Yeah.
I picked a movie that I adore. It has been remastered, restored, and repackaged. It's Chinatown, starring Jack Nicholson. One of my favorite roles for him. It's a landmark film noir directed by Roman Polanski. And it stars Jack Nicholson as Private Eye Jake Gittes. He's living off the murky moral climate of sun-baked pre-war Southern California. He's hired by Faye Dunaway, who's a beautiful socialite, and she's investigating her husband, who apparently is having an extramarital affairs. Gittes is Jake Gittes, who's Jack Nicholson's character, is swept into a maelstrom of double dealings and deadly deceits, uncovering a web of personal and political scandals that come crashing together for one unforgettable night in Chinatown. It also stars John Huston as Faye Dunaway's father. Some amazing scenes in this movie, but this is about water and the city of Los Angeles and water rights and a whole bunch of other things. And it's just really well done, beautifully shot. The repackaging and the restoration of the film means that print's going to look amazing. Timeless movie. Have you ever seen it, Tim?
Of course not.
Well, guess what? Neither is Bob. Bob has not seen the film all the way through, and I'm actually saving this disc for him to just sit and watch it all the way through because it is just super well done. Love it.
Wow.
So that's Chinatown. And the new release this week is a movie that I did want to see in theaters, and it got some great reviews. It was held back for a little bit and then released for a better climate to go to the movies, and that would be Bullet Train, starring Brad Pitt. So he plays an assassin who's coming off therapy, I guess therapy for being a bad person, who knows, or he had bad luck behind some of his last hits, and he is tasked with picking up or getting a briefcase off a Tokyo to Kyoto high-speed train, and it's supposed to be the piece of cake, an easy job. It becomes anything but, and there's a whole bunch of hijinks, and it's a great cast as well, but that would be Brad Pitt in Bullet Train. So that's the release this week.
That's a good train, too.
The Tokyo Kyoto.
That thing flies.
Yeah.
It takes about 3 minutes. It's got to be a quick movie. Bullet Train. So, yeah, exactly. So it's, as John said, there's a sale going on right now with our friends at Deep Discount. You get there by going to focusgroupradio.com. And the sale, as we mentioned, is called Places in the Name Sale. And John picked a movie called Chinatown. I picked a 3-film set, which includes 2 movies that I've been reprimanded for not seeing by everybody at Deep Discount, plus our friend Mr. Nash. Gone with the Wind, Casablanca, and The Wizard of Oz. And the new release this week is Bullet Train. So, again, be sure to head over to focusgroupradio.com. Click on the Deep Discount logo. Start shopping away. It's a good time to add to your collection as well as to start shopping for the holidays and get a gift for that person on your shopping list or to just add to your library. Everyone, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we've got a business birthday and we've got some shop talk, so stay with us.
You're listening to The Focus Group with Tim and John. Learn more at focusgroupradio.com. Now back to The Focus Group with Tim and John. Available pretty much everywhere.
Welcome back to the Focus Group. John Nash with Tim Bennett. FocusGroupRadio.com is the destination for all of us and our also Tuesday podcast, TFG Unbuttoned. So, without further ado, let's go to the business birthday.
Everyone does celebrity birthday greetings.
But the Focus Group is the only show in the universe that celebrates business birthdays.
So before I do the business birthday, I'd be remiss not to mention I was going to do this as the business birthday, but it wasn't really a business birthday. But Divine was born today.
Why don't you think that's a business birthday?
Well, because I was reading and reading and reading. How would you? It's a career, drag queen,
Entertainer.
and entertainer. I don't know if it was a business birthday though. I was trying
I
to.
see your dilemma, because it's not like Divine created a line of, cosmetics
Right.
or, but she was just a cultural icon, right?
Right, and there was also a woman, the very first woman elected to be a mayor of a major city, Bertha Landis, out of Seattle. Also, she was a woman activist, but she was not. There was no business in her background. It was also
Okay.
So I was wondering if
I
we-
could see your criteria is stringent.
sometimes we're loose, but so those were two other people that were in the running. But I selected Ron Joyce, who is essentially the Dunkin' Donuts founder of Canada, which is Tim Hortons. Everybody's familiar with the Tim Hortons
I wasn't
franchise.
until you told me his name at Penn Station one day. Remember they had at Penn, they had the Tim Hortons.
Right, Tim Hortons took over all the Dunkin' Donuts in New York City. So Tim Hortons is a famous franchise out of Canada, which is the equivalent of Dunkin' Donuts, I would say, in the United States. But Ron Vaughan Joyce, was born October 19th, 1930 in Nova Scotia. He died in January 2019 at the age of 88. Canadian entrepreneur and billionaire, one of the most successful Canadian businessmen, won countless awards and gave millions of dollars to Canadian universities and to children's hospitals and children's foundations. He's co-founder of the Tim Hortons donut chain and was a partner with the actual Tim Horton and opened their first franchise in 1964. As I said, he was born in Nova Scotia, moved to Hamilton, Ontario at the age of 16 for better living conditions after post-war World War II, and worked in a number of odd jobs until he eventually landed working for the Hamilton Police Service in Ontario. And he wanted to get involved in the emerging food service industry, and in 1963 he purchased the Dairy Queen franchise.
Really?
And-
Derek, okay.
Dairy
Fudgy the
Queen.
Whale.
Right. So he wanted to open up another franchise, and they wouldn't let him have a second location. So Dairy Queen denied him the second location. So he looked around and found this coffee shop that had a for sale sign on it. And so he went in and talked to the guy, and it was Tim Horton. And this was 1967, and they put together a franchise agreement in which he wrote on it, "You've got to be kidding," because in the franchise agreement it said that he must pay rent in advance. And but anyway, they went into this agreement. They were going to open these coffee and donut franchises. Horton died in a car accident in 1974, so Ron Joyce ended up purchasing all of Horton's shares for about $1 million and assumed full control of the Tim Hortons franchise. He hired a management team and then grew the company. So from the 70s through the 90s, it grew to be a very huge conglomerate of these Tim Hortons coffee shops across Canada. He also teamed up in Canada with Wendy's, fast food restaurants, and wanted to combine both of them to make one big franchise, and actually worked with Wendy's founder Dave Thomas. And they were going to merge both of the companies to have one large company. I was unaware of this, to have a Wendy's and Tim Hortons merger. Did not work. And so Joyce he had bought a bunch of Wendy's stock, eventually sold it, and also got out of the Tim Hortons business as well and went into retirement and started working with giving money and developing some golf resorts and spas. And but also gave an awful lot of money to, as I said, to children's charities. He started the Tim Horton Children's Foundation and some other humanitarian foundations, all related to children and health. He died in he was worth about 1.4 billion US. He died at his home at the age of 88. Sadly, he was accused of sexual harassment. Shortly before he died, he had a healthcare woman that was supposed to take him for some hospital visits, I guess, to the doctor. and she accused him of inappropriately touching her. So she was spending the night, and then she was going to take him to the hospital in the morning. And she claimed that he had allegedly assaulted her at the home. And so this went on, and there was supposedly a court settlement of $50,000. But then she went and sued him again. This went on for a number of years, and they tried to get the case thrown out, but they don't say how it ever was settled. But so that was the end of Mr. Ron Joyce.
You know, first, pretty cool, amazing business career. I guess he and Tim Horton only managed to be partners for 10 years because it looked like the chain opened in 64 and he died, Horton died in a 74. To pick up the pieces after that, to buy his shares, and then to smartly hire a management team to really fine-tune and get Hortons up to speed, or Tim Hortons, is pretty cool. This end-of-life thing that you bring up, the sexual harassment thing, I mean, 88, I'm wondering, well, you know, when you read that, did you wonder if there might have been something, maybe it was unintentional, who knows what, maybe I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt, but once you file a lawsuit against somebody, it has to be followed through on. And whether the merits hold up or not, often people just settle, or, so I wonder about that.
Yeah, and the way it was written, I mean, it was trying to be just very, I guess, it says an unnamed woman in her mid-30s alleged that billionaire co-founder sexually assaulted her at his home. The alleged incident occurred when the woman spent the night at his home so she could drive him to a medical appointment the following day. An out-of-court settlement was reached between two parties. She then came back again, and it resurfaced in 27. The lawyers attempted to throw the case out. Ultimately, was forced to face trial. So who knows?
Just such a kind of small tainted way to end a cool career, huh? And when he left the stage, he actually left and he just did all that charitable work, which I think is cool.
Yeah, a lot of these. Well, there's an awful. Yeah, I mean, a lot of these people. I shouldn't say a lot of these people, but there are a number of people who often get stained or tainted in their older years, and whether it's legitimate or not. In some cases, it certainly is inappropriate because money is. They feel with money you have power. Mm-hmm. We saw that with the Me Too movement, right?
And most notably, as you said, it's wealthy people.
Right.
I don't read about some of this stuff with people that are not capable of paying a $50,000 settlement, right?
Right. But in other cases, you just wonder whether somebody's just trying to take advantage of somebody and they don't know.
Interesting.
What they're doing.
Good business birthday. We have not done him before, and
I
remember when I first learned about Tim Hortons from you, I was like, wow, I didn't even know this thing existed. I saw them, but I didn't know what it was. So as I teased at the beginning of the show, we have two shop talks for you. They're sort of quick. The first one I'm going to talk about is an article that came out in NPR. Americans are becoming less productive, and that's a risk to the economy. In a nutshell, it's not necessarily that Americans are becoming less productive. It's more like the contract that we used to have with our jobs and our commitment to the companies we worked for is wavering quite a bit. And here's an example. They profile a young man named Brian Bowser, 22, and he questions the effort he's put into work, and it's began actually during the pandemic. And so he had a job at a car rental company where he made $25 an hour, and then he got an email one day without any explanation that his salary was going down to $13.50 an hour. So it's not quite. I mean, it's not. Well, it's almost half of what he was making. So he learned that all his colleagues had their wages basically cut in half, and at a moment when companies were desperate for workers and pay was rising across the country. Still, he said that in the short term, in the American workforce, where he'd already been laid off from another job at the beginning of the pandemic, he knew this was just how it goes with companies. That right there is the core of this thing, is our notion that it's not cradle to grave like it used to be when we were growing up. It seems now that we all get the fact that your boss can fire you by email, or you could, or that the time you put in is not necessarily appreciated. You don't get a gold watch. Remember, you used to pick up gold watches or pens at the end of their career. So What was your take on
So
the piece?
there were two things. First of all, I didn't understand why there was really no context around why it went from 25 to 1350. I wondered about that. Was there some special pandemic monies that they had that they gave the workers, and then it was,
Evaporated or
went
something?
down?
Yeah.
And the other thing is, to me, I said, I think a lot of this, you got the pension, you got the gold watch, you stayed for 50 years. That all went away during our grandparents' generation.
Oh, long time ago.
It
80s,
certainly
70s,
wasn't with
80s,
us.
Nope.
We were not part of that. We learned very soon that there was no loyalty necessary. The other thing about them saying that we become less productive because people feel like, oh, I don't give a crap because the company doesn't care about me. And talking about being productive, I wondered whether some of this had to do with the fact that, and they talked about stagnant economies, and I thought, is it really? I'm not so sure. They're talking about productivity of the United States and how it could harm us as a country. And I said, is it productivity? Is it a real number, or is it just simply related to supply and demand and shortages? And I'll use cars as an example. So with these microchips that aren't available, the auto industry is selling X amount of million fewer cars than they would
Because of that. Yeah.
So there's demand for the cars, but they can't build them. So the trickle down effect is it affects all the people that make the components that go into cars, the rubber, the steel, all the
Upholstery,
plastics,
everything,
the upholstery,
yeah.
and then it then goes down to the car dealerships and the mechanics who work on them and the people who sell them and the financing. And so that means productivity just in that one industry alone affects, the economy in a large way. And so yes, productivity will go down, but is that not because the workers don't give a crap or they're lazy or something? It's just simply that there was a supply and a demand issue. And they talk about Japan and how Japan had been stagnant for quite some time, but Japan's a whole different deal in that the government would prop up, which a lot of countries will prop up industries that have no business being in business just to keep workers working. There's an awful lot of companies that Japan would just certainly subsidize to stay in business, to continue making goods. And so then there's an imbalance. And that happens in France. That happens in a number of countries. So I'm not sure that's an apples to apples comparison either. But I was not so sure about this productivity number at 4%.
Or a drop of 4%. Yeah.
A drop of 4% as being. I didn't know I didn't know everything that was put into that number, I guess, was my.
Well,
was
and
my
you're right,
question.
because they said it was annualized, and it's the biggest decline since the government started tracking or keeping track of the number back in 1948. Since then, U.S. productivity has been on a steady upward slope until now. It's one of those articles that I read it, I absorbed it, and I reread parts of it, and I thought, oh, it's exactly what you were saying. There are multiple reasons or prongs to this problem, and it might not. It might have to do with people realizing that, the jobs they go to and that they participate in may not be giving them back the same sense of satisfaction they might have had years ago. Or you read all the time about people quiet quitting.
Right.
Have you read that one where people go and they just do the bare minimum of what they're supposed to do? I think it's a multi-pronged problem, and you identified just a couple of the facets, and there are probably more of them, but. Whatever the reason, or however that statistic is kept, 4.1% decline is there. I would credit it to the last 3 years of insanity.
Well, if you just look at what happened with malls, right?
Yeah.
We've simply gone from people who would go to a mall to shop, is everyone's doing it online. However,
now,
somebody's got to get everything to your house,
Yeah.
and then nothing fits, and you've got to send it back. So instead of now having people working in the retail store, now there's people in warehouses. Now there's people that are doing driving. Now there's people that are having to receive
Different jobs,
and
yeah.
ship goods. Right. So, how are you measuring productivity? I don't know.
Well, it's kind of like, on a side note, Paul Krugman this weekend in the New York Times talked about the measurements for inflation.
Right.
And how if you look at only two or three things that the government does or the Fed does, then you'd be stuck with this idea that we have to raise rates for borrowing money. Krugman says, no, there's other ways of looking at inflation. And if you look at those metrics, they might have overplayed their hand, whatever. So it's all just, I don't want to call it smoke and mirrors, but it's, sort of close.
Yeah.
The other article that I teased at the beginning of the show is headline comes to us, Grindr's incoming CEO is getting blasted for conservative political tweets. Twitter users began to call for others to delete the popular app. So the incoming CEO is named George Arison. And he has made people have naturally gone to his Twitter account and looked at his feed and what he said. And Twitter users have unearthed a tweet of Arison's that, while mostly denouncing Trump, also proclaimed Arison was a conservative and shared some political views with the former president, though he didn't specify which ones. And he says in the tweet, FYI, I'm a conservative and agree with some Trump policies, though he repudiated Trump himself, writing the same day that Trump was everything our founders feared the most. But he did like some of his policies. And he further went on to say, I think at least 10% of Republican voters and a third of moderate independents are the same. Like some of his politics and policies, can't stand having him in office. So Dems need a nominee who can tap into this electoral spectrum. I don't have a problem with what he's saying there, but apparently Twitter and gay Twitter went crazy with this. Was that your impression too?
Yeah, and so I could be wrong, but wasn't Grindr sold to a Chinese conglomerate?
And in fact, the former president, Chen, I think was his name, was in fact taken down because of a lot of harmful things that he said about our community, specifically about his belief in traditional marriage and how that should be upheld. And
which was even far worse about Grindr selling out personal information.
Yeah.
Which would be a bigger issue, I would think, in terms of privacy that people would be upset about. I was more shocked about some of the things that Michael Bloomberg said that I thought I was shocked about Michael Bloomberg's anti-trans stance, which I did not know about, that they highlighted in here. I don't know if you picked up on that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And about some of the things that Bloomberg had said that they highlighted here.
You know what I thought about this? Maybe you're getting ready to say the same thing. Can you say anything anymore if you're in the public space without offending somebody somewhere?
No. And that was my point. We all have friends who voted for Trump.
Yeah.
And some of them have some very
they're one-issue voters.
Reasons. Yeah, maybe a one-issue voter. It could be tax. It could be they have a business. It could be for a number of reasons that I could listen to them and I could disagree, but I could understand where they're from, and they may hear my reasons and disagree, but understand why I voted the way I did. And so I get that. And but I don't think this guy is. I don't think you can go work at Grindr and be anti-gay as a gay man. Maybe you could. I don't know. I mean, this guy's gay and he's married to a man, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what he says. So. I thought this one was a little bit odd because it doesn't say this George Arison.
Arison, yeah.
He hasn't said, he didn't come out and say anything. He said, I agree with some of Trump's policies. That's all he said.
Yeah.
Right. And so there was nothing that he said. There's nothing he said that I thought was anti-gay in any of that.
Yeah.
He could have said, I agree with some of Trump's policies, meaning, I don't believe we should be spending all these money on foreign wars. I don't disagree. I agree with that with Trump. There were some things that Trump did advocate that I think we could all agree with. Yeah. I don't think Trump's bedside manner was very good. I don't think he conducted his, you know what I mean? He just didn't go. Had Trump gone and conducted himself differently and behaved differently and worked with the Congress differently, he probably could have done some good things. And but he didn't, and that is my opinion on that. But were some of his not all of his ideas were bad. Not all of his thoughts were, and some things were bad. Yes, there's been trouble on the border for 25 years.
Immigration has been something that's been punted down the field over and over by multiple Congresses, right. Multiple party domination. Yeah.
It's been an issue for the country for a long time.
Yeah.
For all parties. And rather than them sitting down and figuring it out, they just want to point fingers at whoever's in power. And so I get all that. But I think this here was probably a little unfair because I don't know what the issue was that this guy had said, and he didn't say anything specifically other than I agreed with some of his policies.
Well, another thing that I'm kind of fascinated by is it's a tech company, it's a hookups app, the whole bit.
Yep.
Do you want how does the CEO's personal views about the left and the right or the politics of different parties, how does that affect running the company? How does that seep into the actual app? I don't believe it does. But do we have this purity test that if you run a company that's predominantly for gay male hookups, that you have to be X, Y, and Z? We've seen people that are perfect on paper run some of our organizations, like the HRC, for example. And then suddenly, remember the former president of the HRC was somehow hooked into the Cuomo fiasco here in New York State, and boom, gone. And that was a little more egregious because of providing personal information, doing R&D, some hit stuff. So yeah,
if people knew the political views of the people running Subaru, there would never been a lesbian that would have ever bought a Subaru.
I was going to say, you and I, here's the thing.
There would never be a lesbian or gay person who would have ever bought a Subaru if they knew the political leanings of the people that ran the company.
Yeah.
End of story.
Mm-hmm. And I could tell you, Tim and I could tell you about a bunch of other brands that we worked for. When you go to the boardroom or the C-suite, there's the stuff goes on behind closed doors that a lot of us don't talk about, but we've been party to. And that's all there is to it. And I think that for having been in multiple decades in our careers, we've just seen it all. We've seen good intentions. We've seen people who have odd political views, but they still sign off on a good program to reach the community or something, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I've sat and listened to,
yeah,
people, we'll support the HRC and we'll support giving same-sex partner benefits, but we're not going to allow adoption. We're not going to pay for adoption because gay people shouldn't be allowed to have kids. Oh, okay.
But that's balanced with a meeting you had once with the head of HR where you were telling the Japanese who were over from Japan about the same-sex benefits and partnerships for health insurance and stuff. They're like, yes, we do this in Canada, no problem.
It's okay, yeah. The Japanese were further ahead than the Americans.
Yeah,
and everybody was afraid of the Japanese, but the Japanese were further ahead than the Americans at that point because they understood Canada. Anyway.
There you go.
It's, end of story, right? So, hey, thanks for joining us today on the Focus Group. As always, we appreciate you joining us. And we like to say, we started charting. We are in the top 1% of all podcasts out there.
Worldwide.
Which I think is fantastic. And in the top 100 of all marketing and business podcasts. So thank you for staying with us. And our longevity. John and I were trying to find out what our superpower is. And John, do we need a sexier word than longevity, John, being 14 years on air?
I think we do. Longevity sounds like you should put me in a wheelchair and give me a cane. But
I was wondering if we should come up with a different word. But we'll have to work on that.
Well, you need to look at the candy industry for that. Like, we need something that's fun, like long-lasting.
Vintage? No.
Yeah. No.
Old, mature, pioneering.
We're the everlasting gobstopper.
Steadfast.
Everlasting gobstopper from Willy Wonka.
Steadfast.
The candy that never would go away.
Steadfast and the bad seed. Anyway, thanks for joining us. And thanks to our friends at Deep Discount. Head over there and start shopping away. You get there by going to focusgroupradio.com. This week they have Places in the Name sale going on. I picked a 3-film collection, which includes Casablanca, Gone with the Wind, and The Wizard of Oz. And John picked the movie Chinatown. The new release this week is Bullet Train. And remember what we always say, don't text and drive, arrive alive. And we'll see you on Tuesday with our podcast, TFG Unbuttoned. Find all of our media at focusgroupradio.com. Have a great week. Take care.
It's The Focus Group with Tim Bennett and John Nash. Accessible on all platforms. Subscribe, like, and rate us on your platform of choice. Learn more at focusgroupradio.com.
That was a stunning focus group.